Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Today we have a real gem on the show. And really, she is a gem. She's a gem in many ways. Even her name, Peggy Pearl, thus a gem. Peggy is the director of the St. Johnsbury History and Heritage Center in, well, St. Johnsbury. Welcome to the show, Peggy.
Thanks, Scott.
So what do you think about that? We talked about it. You made that comment about gem, and I said, wow, that's great to use in the opening. Yeah, so what do you think about that connection? You're the gem in the Northeast Kingdom.
I don't necessarily buy that. I'm just a historian.
Right. And even though you are a very esteemed historian at that, anytime I mention down your way in St. Johnsbury, I've never heard a bad thing about you. No, if you walk the streets, you could certainly find somebody who's going to say something, maybe not so nice about me, but that's okay. But I've never heard anything derogatory about Peggy Pearl. Usually Genius comes in, or Knower of All. But,
Scott, you haven't been listening very well. Or maybe you've just been hitting the right people.
So tell me, Peggy, at first, I've admired you from afar about your vast knowledge, really. But who is Peggy Pearl?
Well, I was born and brought up in St. Johnsbury, and I like to say that I was brought up in Mount Pleasant Cemetery. My dad, who was quite the historian, I would oftentimes be helping him out in the cemetery. And for instance, if we were digging a grave of somebody I had no idea of, by the time I got done digging the grave with my dad, I felt that I knew them very well because of all the stories and things that he would relate to me. And he had multiple friends that also were great historians of St. Johnsbury, including Graham Newell and George Crosby and Claire Dunn Johnson. So I was in the company of some really great local historians.
Yeah, it sounds like your story is very similar to mine. While my father didn't dig graves, he was a master collector of all things history. Like I remember when we were kids, he would go out with, like the esteemed local historian who's now gone, Chet Carpenter, and they would go out digging in dumps, old, farm dumps, riverside dumps, and they would be in search of old bottles. And so while I have my degree in psychology, I don't have a written degree in history, but I have a living degree in history.
Yeah.
As in, my father was big into history, and some of his acquaintances, like your father's, were also big into it. So it sounds like we absorbed a lot of our love in history.
Yeah, I think it was in the gene pool.
Yeah. So did you go to school for history, or is this like, other than the School of Hard Knocks, as in learning from your father, do you have a degree in history?
Yeah, I got a degree at Lyndon State, and I started teaching in Barnet, Vermont for 1 year. And then I was asked by Fred Mole if I would consider coming to the Fairbanks Museum, and I thought I had died and gone to heaven.
Yeah, that would be a great job. So do you work there still or?
No, and there was a time back in 2009 and 10 that um, that the decision was made that the Fairbanks Museum could no longer house or exhibit the history collections. And so it was decided that that was going to be dropped from their mission, and they were going to stay with the natural history, astronomy, and meteorology. And so it became essential, at least to my way of thinking, that we had to keep St. Johnsbury's history in St. Johnsbury.
Right. Yeah, and St. Johnsbury has such a wealth of history. It's like, you know, it's almost like a different world in well, the history of your region is almost like a different world than the history of Essex and Orleans County, which are all separate. But you had
Right.
much more of an industrial history than the rest of the other two counties.
Yep, and that industry, was so philanthropic, which, hence the Fairbanks Museum, the YMCA, the Athenaeum. I mean, it just it put St. Johnsbury on the map.
Right. So tell me, is this so the Fairbanks Museum's decision to drop the local history? Is that how the History and Heritage Museum arose?
Absolutely. Yep.
How did that happen then?
Well, there was a time that two or three of us were camped out at Summer Street School in the basement area, just looking for a place to house St. Johnsbury's history. And we spent a lot of time on the armory. And, at one point, pipes had broken, and it released asbestos, and it became literally an environmental nightmare. So, that time was given up, and then we finally successfully located a place on Summer Street. And one of the big things that drove us in that direction was the fact that it had a very large barn, because we have a lot of very large items that could not be housed, so to speak, in a house.
And so what year was this?
We opened, I mean, we had to get organized and everything as far as getting everything in order, but we opened in November of 2015.
The interesting thing, I haven't made it there yet. So I have committed myself to in early October, you're going to finally provide me with a tour of your facility.
Well, we would be happy to do that. And one of the things that has been excruciatingly painful to me is there are a lot of people that say, gee, I haven't gotten there yet. But one of the great things is once they get there, they are just wowed by it. And
Right.
and I have to say that's where the volunteers are really shine through, is the exhibits and the collections that we have and the care that we give them and the hours that we're able to be open. It's just phenomenal. I mean, just yesterday we had a couple people come in, and they had brought a soapbox derby car to us that used to go down places like Hastings Hill and St.
Right.
Johnsbury. It was just awesome to get this piece. And but yet they were just awed by what had been accomplished there. So, I think it will be well worth your trip down.
Oh yeah, and no doubt I'll spotlight it as well. And that's how come I wanted you on today, because I wanted to, I know you don't like the spotlight, but I know you like the spotlight all the work you and your group are doing. And you have an event coming up soon, if I'm correct.
Yeah, we it got started back in my days at the days or years at the Fairbanks Museum. I used to go out with a collection of history items and talk to the kids about how things were in the old days, whether it was washing clothes, ironing clothes, or farming. And in time, that grew into a weekend where we actually had people come and demonstrate things like butter making, soap making, and all those types of things so that the kids could really see how those artifacts that I was showing them worked. And so once that was done at the museum, it there was no bridge to it, so it kind of lapsed for a few years, and then we have gradually brought it back. It's much smaller. There aren't nearly as many exhibits, but we have brought it back to a weekend, or I should say a Saturday in September, and this year it will be on the grounds on September 30th from 10 to 4.
Even people of our generation, we can now show young people a few things. Like, for example, we can show them how we actually turn the TV without a remote. Uh, and and sometimes if you had a rooftop, somebody had to go up on the roof and turn
Yeah.
the antenna just a little bit. Or we could have an exhibit to show young people how to call on a rotary phone that was connected to the wall. And if you had a long enough cord, you could talk to somebody while laying on the couch. And so even our generation has a little bit of history behind us.
Oh, it certainly does. Kids can't believe it when I say I grew up in a house that didn't have a TV. And I also ran across a newspaper clipping of my grandparents receiving the first call from the town manager in St. Johnsbury years ago.
Right. My father, who died on Christmas this last year, he was probably the oldest living antenna installer in the state. As in, he started installing antennas. 19 in the 1950s. I should know. I wrote about it. And when it was the early days of TV in Orleans County, and when he put it up on his parents' house, the neighbors came over to watch it because they couldn't believe it, because until then they would all walk downtown, stare in the window at of a store, and just to see the TV, and the reception was, pretty atrocious. But that was like something that was awesome for them to watch. So he said putting up antennas was a spectator event when he first began.
Yeah, yeah. I wasn't totally without TV. If I was a good girl, I could go down the hill to my grandparents' house and watch the TV that they won for $1 at the local A&P store.
Yeah. Yeah. So uh, well, it's like, for example, I was recently over in the Philippines, and before I left, I went to a friend of mine who's a sugar maker, and I brought maple syrup. And it's like you're going to be teaching different ways of making stuff or how to use equipment at this event that's coming up. I showed them how to make sugar on snow, but I had to resort to sugar on ice.
Yeah,
So, kind of a similar thing. So, what day is this event in St. Johnsbury?
it's on September 30th, and I should say I said it's on our grounds. It is, but three doors down, so to speak, to the north is the old Summer Street School, and in
Right.
that parking lot, there's going to be an exhibit from Vermont gas and steam engines. We don't have room for them on our property, so we've been allowed to use the parking lot at Summer Street School, and they will be demonstrating their, as people refer to them as their one-lunger engines. So that's an added thing this year, and we're happy to have them.
What are you going to be like? I mentioned making maple syrup, but are you going to be using like, or have you done in the past, like the use of, say, a butter churn?
We're not we're not doing butter this year, but we are doing. There's a fellow that demonstrates pump logs, which
Yeah,
was
yeah.
yesterday's pipes to carry water, and that is that's just a truly fascinating thing of boring the hole through and then joining the pump logs together, which can still be found being unearthed in places. And we have things like a spring pole lathe for turning. So those are things that most have never seen operate. And the Civil War hemlocks have
Yeah.
come for many years, and they demonstrate as far as what life was like back in the Civil War. But they also have a forge that they can demonstrate blacksmithing and things like that. And we
Right.
have a couple of volunteers that do toys and games, and they can actually engage the kids that attend in in these things that went on.
It sounds a little bit like up our way is the old stone house days,
Yeah.
where they have like they have somebody work in a forge. In their case, because of their setting, they might have oxen working oxen or something, or but it sounds a lot like old stone house days. What you're doing.
Well, it and it is, because I can actually remember way back uh, before the old stone house was, as big as it is today, of them, you know, asking us information. I mean, I remember when they had their barn put up and so forth, and so I think they took some ideas from us as far as starting their own program up there, which is kind of neat.
Right. Yeah, and we have it's gone through. Peggy Day Gibson was outstanding there now, and then Molly Vasey, who's a new generation of history enthusiasts. She's taken it to the next level. So it's always nice to see younger people come into the history world. Do you have many young people down your way who are really into history?
Um, that's we have some of the schools doing bits of the history, like we have in the past taken second graders on a historic Main Street walk. We have had academy students come over and look at the different objects and do their own um, sort of project on how they fit into the work. and and we there is a group at the academy that I believe is maybe an archival group. So yes, and every once in a while we have a young person that wants to volunteer or do a special project. We had one young lady that did a capstone project. through history and heritage. I would say not as many as I'd like, but hopefully we can plant more seeds.
You know, the interesting thing is, I have a 7-year-old grandson going on 8, and he lives in Marquette, Michigan. And I divide my time now following the passing of my wife. I divide it between Marquette, Michigan and Derby, Vermont. And that that young man absorbs history. He goes to the history events they're having. He can already tell me where something used to stand, and I would like his love of history far is the most I've ever seen in a child his age. And of course, living on Lake Superior, he can go into great depths about the different theories of the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald. And I'm wondering whether he will ever grow out of it, because I always liked history, but I can't say I loved history. It was just part of my life. Um, but the kind of history I like to be able to sit down with my history and talk to them, as in live in history, chronicling it before it's lost. And that's the one thing I like about my work. And that's why I so appreciate people like you who are trying to keep your end of things alive for future generations, whether it be the the how to use a butter churn or the spinning wheel. I love all that stuff too.
Yeah, and I think Scott, I think sometimes it does enter the gene pool. I have a son who's a park ranger at Independence Hall, and you know, he just loves talking with people and showing them. And you know, I laughingly say, "Oh, I don't know where he got that gene, but yes, I do."
You know, the interesting thing is, I won't say my children dislike history, but they have very little interest in it. So it seems to have jumped a
Yeah,
generation to my grandson. And so we only have about 8 more minutes left. So again, what is the name of the event that you're having at the end of the month?
it's called the Festival of Traditional Crafts. And some of the things that I didn't mention is we will have somebody spinning, we will have somebody quilting, we will have a woman that demonstrates art through a cutting of paper with sheep shears,
Hmm.
and we will have something on apples and cider and butter making, apple butter. And we also have a model of a sawmill that could be actually demonstrated, but it's just amazing to see how that works. And then we have all set up in the barn. We have things on ice cutting, and you've done a lot with the handies up north
Oh
with
yeah,
the
yeah.
ice cutting. And we have the handies from the St. Johnsbury area, and we have a good demonstration on that. And it's just a great day to see everything that we have, and you know, learn some of these things like shingle making we have, and candle dipping. So we've got a number of things going on, and we're kind of constrained by our space. But I think having the space up at Summer Street School and allowing the gasoline engines to be a part of it is going to be a draw as well.
You know, the good thing is there are still remnants of those generations who will remember some of this stuff. You know, like there are still people who grew, you know, they're in their 90s now, who who remember some of these things that are largely extinct to in other people's minds.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, when I did the various classes at the museum, every once in a while I got a little brave and actually impersonated. For instance, I remember thinking about all the things that had to do with logging. And I thought, how in the world are they going to understand what a PV is if I don't dress up like a logger and demonstrate? So, sometimes you got to be a little foolish.
No, well, and that's it. I think you have to make history fun too, or at least colorful, because I think back to school, and I'm not saying I guess teachers had their curriculum, but name and dates, that's all important stuff, but it's not the only important stuff. And you've got to bring a life to history, and what you're doing by dressing up, you're at least able to bring a little bit of humor, and I think people remember it better that way.
Yeah, I do too. I think being caught up in names and dates is not a good thing.
No. Um, hey, we only have about 5 more minutes left, but even, little things in history, though, actually they actually thrill me. Everybody focuses on, including myself, say World War II, the Depression and everything. Those things are important, but like, I didn't grow up in the outhouse days. So
Yeah.
one time I even wrote an article through memories of people about stories from the outhouse.
Oh, right.
And it's just like, a lot of people don't understand why, when I say they had a Sears and Roebuck's catalog
Right.
hanging there, like, well, why would that be there? Because that's what they used for toilet paper in an earlier time.
Yeah.
And so I like the little things in history too. And here's the other thing that some people shy away from. I don't, because I think it's part of history. Is I'm not afraid to write about the gnarly and sometimes dark chapters of our history. And because I think we need to do that, because of it is part of our history. It might be sad chapters, but it's
part of it.
It's part of it. And I think, as they say, if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. So
yeah. And Scott, if I might, I just want to say that History and Heritage is open Monday through it's open Monday through Saturday, 10 to 4 from June to September. And every other Saturday, we open as well. And then in October, we changed to a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday schedule, because there just aren't the numbers that come during the winter months. But and the admission is by donation, and I think it's well worth the visit.
Okay. We have about a minute left, and just to say it once again, your upcoming event is on what day and what time?
September 30th, 10 to 4. And it promises, I think, to have a little bit of something for everyone, whether they're just visiting the center or concentrating on apples or playing games or whatever.
And the address again is?
421 Summer Street. Summer Street runs parallel to Main Street.
Okay, well, thank you for coming on the show, and I'll say it again. Pearl is the great last name for you, because you are one of the gems of Vermont's Northeast Kingdom.
Well, thanks, Scott.
And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.